Hello and welcome to Property Question Time. I'm Stephen Galpin and this is the show where you can have your property related questions answered by our team of property experts. And joining me today is Ian Humphreys, CEO and founder of Brickflow, digital marketplace for commercial real estate finance. Bit of a mouthful, but we got it all out. Anyway, very good to have you in, Ian. Very good indeed.
Thank you.
And joining in is Richard Murray, CEO of Eurolink, provider of VECO management software. Welcome to you, Richard. Good to have you back.
Thanks, Stephen. Good to be back.
Good. Okay, well, we'll get straight on with the questioning. And Richard, we'll go with you first. One of the government's new requirements will be the necessity for all landlords to be registered on a national database. Good luck with that, I think. But anyway, could I ask the experts with knowledge of these sort of systems to comment on how this will be in practice? After seeing the catastrophe of the COVID app, the government's success with these type of databases is to say that at least limited. And yeah. I just don't know how it's going to work, do you? Or how it's going to be enforced?
I think that there's some there's a blueprint to this, whereas with the COVID app there was no blueprint. I think it's a slightly unfair comparable. We've got 4.5 million rented households in the UK, so we're not talking about huge numbers there. Also, I think the blueprint I'm probably thinking about is licensing. Licensing has been quite commonplace for a number of years now. Landlords, having to have a license to rent their properties. So I see it as a bit of as that being a progression to a national register. The problem, and that's been run by local authorities quite successfully across all London boroughs and beyond. I think the problem I have with this is a rogue landlord is exactly that, right? They're a rogue, and if they're therefore operating outside of the sort of compliance parameters, are they likely to be signing up to a register? I just don't think that's the case. Whatever your kind of views, political views or otherwise, the Mayor and the London Assembly formed a rogue landlords register in 2021, which I actually thought was a step in the right direction, because those people who will be motivated to register a property or a landlord as being rogue, then at least that gives some sort of history to that person, history to that particular property, and they're going to be far more motivated to register that sort of information. So I think there's lots of good projects that we can follow as an industry and take some learning from. And then hopefully it won't be a COVID app type situation. As I said, I think the volumes are far less. I think there's far more experience within the property sector to deliver the right sort of registration process and a register that will be fit for purpose.
I have to say, I've always thought that renting a property, I think you should be licensed. And I think it would not be unreasonable to expect a new landlord to take a half-day course, either on Zoom or something, with the local authority to understand what your obligations are, your legal obligations, where potential liabilities lie and that sort of thing. And I think that would be the ideal point to say, and now you've done your course, you will now register and put your property on.
Similar to grassroots sports. If you volunteer in grassroots sports, you have to go through quite a strict process to be able to operate. I mean, it seems like a similar thing to me, or a similar approach, that if you are in your idea there, you're going to say, well, I want to be a landlord. Well, yeah, you can't just decide. You need to have, it's almost a safeguarding issue.
Yeah, absolutely right. I mean, we're in such a litigious age, aren't we? And any breach of the regulations under the new laws is going to be quite a serious matter.
And I think most people would want to undertake that sort of course, but we're talking about a rogue landlord. Again, a rogue landlord is not going to go out of their way to spend half a day doing a course on something that they've got no intention of implementing.
I suppose the rogue landlord, I suppose, takes his strength from saying to a tenant, well, you're getting the place a little bit cheaper, I want it cash in hand, I want this, that and the other, so you gain, I gain. and it's almost self-feeding, isn't it, to a degree? And that's what's got to be stopped, really.
I agree.
You know, it really has. What do you think?
Is there enough of a problem in terms of the percentages of rogue actors to warrant a national database, do we think?
I think the argument there is, you know, one badly managed property where there's a, you know, no gas expiry, or sorry, no gas safety certificate, something goes wrong, you know, family.
But I think to your point,
in the property, I think that's probably one too many.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah. But I think to your point is that person is probably going to be deliberately trying avoid any kind of censorship. So is it solving a problem?
And this is why I think the kind of the approach that London took in 2021
that sounds much
seems
more
to me to be
a lot cheaper.
A lot cheaper. Everyone's motivated to make it work.
I think sounds like a peer review system,
which is much better. Yeah.
I think the other issue is, of course, that, you know, under the latest stats, a lot of the substandard properties are actually held by the housing associations and local authorities. Which is a bit of a shame, isn't it? A bit sad.
Well, the other issue I can foresee as well is, I mean, I have buy-to-lets which sit under a licensing system, so familiar with that. But presumably all these boroughs will have different tech or different systems, and you're now asking them to migrate everything to a new system, which is going to create a huge amount of work. Yeah. And we were talking about local authorities that are already severely under-resourced anyway. Yeah. So are we just adding more workload to something that perhaps doesn't need, like say, the rogue peer-reviewed system seems a lot cheaper solution.
I think that's the way to go,
All right, well, I don't suppose we're going to solve it all in one go, are we? But there we are.
Unfortunately not.
Ian, what's the panel's view on the reintroduction of 100% mortgages? My feeling is that it will help developers sell their products and at the same time help many young people get on the property ladder. And I have to say, I don't think it was our young people having 100% mortgages that caused the problem in 2008 and 2009, was it? It was the American subprime market flogging off portfolios of overstacked lending portfolios, wasn't it?
Ninja loans, right? Yeah. No income, no job, no assets. So yeah, I mean, look, I think it's a great thing. Take out developers from it. I mean, it may help developers sell properties, but I don't think that should be the focus of this product.
Well, hold on. Can I just stop you there?
Yeah.
I mean, I've thought for a long time that actually developers will build enough houses that we need. They'll hit all the numbers you want if they know they can sell the product.
Well, I think the bigger problem is planning. Because people are just not getting through their development cycle quickly enough. You know, historically, a development cycle might be 2 years. Speaking to people now are telling me it's typically 4 years. Just to get, it will take you, you know, rather than the old system where it's 8 to 12 weeks for a planning decision, then now everything can be delayed. And it's not the planning or the local authorities' fault. I mean, they are severely under-resourced. So I think the problem it does solve is around getting people onto the ladder that can afford rent at the levels that the mortgage payments would be, but just don't have enough spare capacity month to month, cost of living, etc., to actually save the deposit needed to get a 10% deposit. I mean, if we're in London, you know, average flat price is going to be 500, 600,000. I mean, put stamp duty and legal costs on top of that to get a 10% deposit and transaction costs, you're close to sort of £100,000. I mean, how long is it going to take someone saving £1,000 a month to do? I mean, it's a long time, right? So, and not everyone has the benefit of the bank of mum and dad, as we say. So, somebody who is paying £1,000, £1,200, £1,500 a month rent, and has been doing so for a long period of time, if their mortgage payment is at that level or below, then absolutely, why can they not get a mortgage?
Yeah, I see there's a lot of political clamour this week, in fact, to cut stamp duty on normal house sales other than second or holiday homes, and I think that might be a good thing. But I've always thought that actually that stamp duty ought to be paid by the seller, not the buyer. That way the full price of the property is fundable, isn't it? It cuts down the amount of cash they've got to find to get on
I think one of the things that could quite easily be addressed in terms of freeing up family homes is making stamp duty exempt for people looking to downsize. So if you look at the older generation, perhaps who've got a house, children have moved out, they're still living in 4 or 5 bedroom house in the suburbs. They perhaps want to move into the city, be closer to their children, their grandchildren, closer to transport links, activity, entertainment. They shouldn't be expected to pay a huge sum of stamp duty to free up that house for a family of 4 or 5. I think that would be something the government should definitely look at.
Okay, well, on that note, we'll go to our break. So join me again after the break when we'll be asking Ian and Richard more of your questions. Hello and welcome back to part 2 of Property Question Time. I'm joined by Richard Murray and Ian Humphreys. Welcome back, guys. And we'll get straight on with the questioning. Richard, I run my lettings business on a pretty industry standard software package. As we expand the business and legislation becomes even more strict, specifically in the area of discrimination, is there a software solution that would work across my employees to ensure that they do not inadvertently discriminate? I'm wondering if there is, for instance, perhaps a disclaimer with some guidance detail that could be signed by an applicant to say that they were satisfied with the qualifying of their application to rent.
It's a tough question.
It's a very tough question, but I think just one of the things I just want to say about this in relation to the new letting regulations, yes, you've got further reasons or examples of discrimination, for instance, not letting pets into properties, that sort of thing. I just wonder, so all right, you make your application and the landlord is obliged to consider whether to let have a pet or not. Well, I mean, my attitude would be, well, I've considered it, and the answer is no. But that's probably not going to be good enough. And I just wonder, though, where that applicant goes with his complaint about me being unreasonable, because by the time it gets heard, listened to, or adjudicated on, I mean, he's going to have found another property and maybe even move districts. So I just don't understand how your software packages and the aids to an agent are going to help in this respect. I can't see.
Okay, so we're talking about rent reform here, and we're talking about conscious and unconscious bias.
Yes, that's a very good word.
Which is really hard to monitor, to police, to train. How do you train someone to not have unconscious bias?
I think part of the problem with AI, isn't it?
It is. Yeah, very much. So it's really difficult. It's a really difficult part of the reforms, to be honest, and how are we going to help with that I think is the question. I don't think a disclaimer is the answer. I think a disclaimer would have to be so precise, and you'd have to be highlighting it to such a degree that I think you'd end up spending more time explaining what the disclaimer is actually covering than it would in serving its purpose. Personally, I think the answer lies in delivering self-service across the industry. So what we're saying is, if 50 people, so an extreme example, if 50 people want to apply to rent a property, then in theory with rent reform, you have to give all 50 people the equal opportunity to apply for that property without any bias, conscious or otherwise. So I think, to be fair to agents, without some sort of self-serve platform or some sort of self-service element to how they manage those applications, I don't see how it's going to be possible to give everyone exactly the same amount of time and energy and effort to process their application. So I think self-serve is going to be a big part of it. Then at least you've given all 50 applicants the same opportunity via a URL to say, okay, here's your application process. We can help you. We can fill it out. We talked about chatbots in a previous program. But I think that's probably going to be the best way to get over this particular person's concerns. I don't believe a disclaimer is going to cut it.
And what about, I suppose, again, what's critical here would be the communication between the agent and the landlord.
Right.
Of how he puts forward any of those 50 applicants.
Okay, so of the 50, if 10 actually get through the referencing, get through the whole process, and there's 10 to be presented to the landlord, again, at this point, if everyone's had the equal sort of chance to apply for the property, the 10 are presented to the landlord. I think your point is a very, very good one. What if the landlord is then biased towards a particular applicant?
Yeah.
Well, I think the question was an agent. So my clients are agents. So I focus on keeping my clients compliant, and that's what we need to do, and that's what we need to get better at in the future, all of us, and particularly with rent reform. And remember, rent reform is coming in. There'll be obviously case law we'll need to go through to create to bed it down, basically to bed the legislation down. So we've got some challenging times ahead, but nothing that we can't overcome. But I mean, I'm not sure then where you're saying to the landlord, unless you make it very clear to them that they shouldn't be biased in any way.
Yeah, I mean, I can think of landlord examples. I mean, I dealt with blocks down here, and some landlords had said, look, it's an open plan kitchen. I'm a little bit against having tenants from the sort of Asia Pacific areas because they tend to stir fry a lot of their food and it goes everywhere in the living room because it's open plan. But of course that really would be quite a strong bias, wouldn't it?
100%.
You just can't do that. But my point would be if the landlord has said, well, to the agent, look, I'm not keen on this, that, and the other, he's going to have it on his mind.
And this is what makes it very, very difficult.
It's going to be very difficult, isn't it?
The other thing is you not taking into account is the landlord circumstances, because the landlord circumstances may be such that someone's offering 6 months rent up front. Mm-hmm. Well, if they've got a cash flow problem at that point in time, that person actually becomes their preferred applicant. However, they're therefore being biased towards the 6 month deposit application. So.
Well, I think also it sounds like it would run against the grain in terms of what an agent does, like part of their role. I mean, part of your role, presumably as an agent acting for the landlord, is to secure the best tenant, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And if the best tenant, that's criteria that there'll be a lot of things to look at. But I mean, financial standing is going to be one, right? So if you've got 10 people and one is financially stronger than all the others, that's probably the one.
You've also got the agent's fee aspirations to take into account as well when he's considering that. Absolutely. Because if he gets the 12 months all up front or something, he gets all his fees up front. And that's a consideration. Very difficult.
It's legislation that is designed to make the private rental sector fairer for applicants and tenants, not for landlords.
Yes.
So that's the aspirational kind of approach to this legislation. And again, politically, it's a very easy path to tread, right?
You can see culturally it's going to be a difficult thing to adopt because it will go against what an agent's always done.
Yeah. It's going to take a lot of landlords out of the market, I think.
It definitely will. Yeah.
Okay, in your question. It seems that green innovations in property development have, because of the cost of living crisis, been put on the back burner. I know that some financial institutions require developers to implement eco-friendly products as a condition of the development finance. Do the experts think that this practice will expand or drift away in the current economic situation?
So, the number of lenders that have started offering packages to developers to improve the standards of energy efficiency is definitely increased. There should probably be more lenders in the space that are offering these incentives, but a really good example of this is there's a couple of lenders that will offer you an interest rate for your loan, and then if you deliver high category B or A standard properties, SAP scores are above 85, 86, which is quite hard to achieve. You need to have things like triple glazing, solar panels and things like this on your properties. Then they'll discount the rate before you repay the loan. So you might go from 9% down to 7%. So it's a significant saving if you're borrowing across, 4, 5, 10 million pounds, you're talking about, tens, hundreds of thousands of pounds in interest cost savings. So the idea is that the increased cost that you've incurred by delivering these energy efficiencies is actually offset by the interest saving. But I would also say these properties are more desirable.
Particularly at the moment.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So it's very much when you launch into market and you can say to somebody, look, your energy bills, here's the standard and this is where your energy bills are going to be, then I think it's a lot more appealing.
But it's actually the right approach as well, because any retrofit energy efficiency scheme that's ever been implemented has not worked.
No.
And it's actually failed badly.
Yeah.
So if we don't go down that route, I don't know how it, I don't know where where it ends.
Yeah, I think these, like you say, these things do tend to not work that well. So if you're going from the ground up, if you put it and you're incentivizing people to do that correctly now. Yeah,
I mean, on
really
the programme, we've had many instances of these heat exchange pumps, for instance, not really being suitable, being overpriced, causing all sorts of internal alterations to be made to make them work, and therefore they become just financially unrealistic, I suppose is the expression. And I just wonder whether the government or whoever's driving this really understands enough about eco products to really recommend. I mean, we've had it with cars, haven't we? They told us to buy diesels 5 years ago. I mean, now you're sort of almost penalised for having a diesel, aren't
Absolutely,
you?
Yeah.
So I just don't know whether we've got enough research going on, have we?
Probably not. There can always be more, but I do think the general move towards being more energy efficient is a good thing. A lot of the products that I mentioned earlier are actually part supplemented by the government. So that reduction in cost is actually supplemented by Homes England. So that's where that money's coming from. So it is being driven by state down into the private sector to allow this to happen organically.
Well, that's no bad thing, is it?
No, absolutely.
Okay, gentlemen, Richard Murray, CEO of Eurolink, Ian Humphreys, CEO and founder of Brickflow, thank you both very much for coming in. Great answers to the questions. Thank you for watching. I'm Stephen Galpin. Join me again next time on Property Question Time.